are HTTP verbs and HTTP methods? We already know this flow from the browser to UI server to API server to database, right? Already know. Now, whenever a request goes from UI server to REST API, it also contains the HTTP verbs. And here are those HTTP verbs or HTTP methods also. They are both same things. These get, post, put, delete, patch methods. These are HTTP verbs. Now, basically, along with the URL only, this type of action will go, okay? So, for example, the request should get data from the API or post and submit data to the API. For that, we will use these HTTP methods. I am telling you like in which scenarios. Okay, so by looking at these verbs name, you can easily identify their purpose also, right? And here is a very simple definition of HTTP methods. HTTP methods, also known as HTTP verbs, are a set of action that a client can take on a resource. In the upcoming question, I will show you the role of these HTTP methods with an example also. Okay. What are the get, post, put, and delete HTTP methods? Let's quickly see all these methods with the definitions and the examples. The first one is get method, which is used to retrieve data from a specified resource. For example, if this is the HTTP request URL and HTTP request method is get here, then a list of all the users will be retrieved from the REST API as a response. Remember, in this case, users are the resource, okay? Also, with this get method, you can retrieve the details of a single user also by passing this user ID in the URL like this. Then the second is the post method, which is used to submit data which has to be processed. For example, this is the same URL as of above the get request, right? But this time the request method will post data instead of get. And also in the request body, there will be the data of the user sent by the UI server, okay? So basically in a get method request, the request body can be empty or it's optional, but in post you will send some data to the server. Okay, the third HTTP method is put, which is used to update a resource or create a new resource if it does not exist. For example, if this is the request URL and the request method is put here, it means the user of this ID is already present in the database, and now you are basically replacing that existing user detail with the details which are you now sending in the request body with the put request. Okay, got it? And yes, if the user is not there, then it will create the new user. Okay. Finally, we have the delete method, and as its name suggests, it will remove a resource user. For example, if this is the user ID 123, then this will be deleted from the user resources or from the database. And here your request body is optional. Great. This is the idea of the top 4 HTTP methods. And if you look closely here, then the URL can be same. Okay, you can see the URL can be same of the two requests, but the action method is different. So always the action will be taken based on the URL plus action method combined. Okay, URL alone can't decide the action. Okay, what is the difference between the put and the patch methods? Now there is one more HTTP method, and that is patch method. I am covering it separately because it is slightly confusing with the put method, which confusion I will clear now. First thing is, what is the similarity between put and patch? Okay, and here it is. Both put and patch methods are used to update a resource by replacing the resource with the new data provided in the request. I hope it's clear to you already. Now, what is the difference? Let me explain with the help of this code. For example, this is your put request URL and put request body. Okay, this request body received from the client should have all the details of the user resource, because put will do a complete resource replacement. Complete. Okay, now listen carefully. Here is the patch URL and patch request body. Here the URL is same, but in patch request body the client will only send those fields that needs modification, not all the fields. Okay, for example, in this case we only want to update the email and age of this user 123. So this will not impact other fields of the user. It's not a complete update. Okay, it's just a partial update. Great. In short, patch method, as I said, will do a partial resource update and not will do the complete resource update like the put method. And that's the answer, and the same difference I have written here also, so that your last minute revision just before the interviews will be very quick and fast. Explain the concept of idempotence in RESTful API. And in this is not a very important question, but some students says that they have been asked in interview, so let's understand it. Idempotent is sorry for my pronunciation, it's idempotent or idempotent, I don't know. So idempotent is a concept that guarantees that performing the same operation multiple times will always give the same output, same response, same result. Okay, so the word is hard but the purpose meaning is easy. Okay, for example, see here. See, if you send this get method request 100 times again and again, the result will always be the same. Okay, you will get the response with the users list, right? Same result. Now, similar to get, we have the put and delete methods also. Those are also idempotent. Okay. Now, put because if you send to update the same request body again and again, so every time the same replacement will happen and the result will be same. So that is idempotent. Now, what is non-idempotent methods? For example, this post method. Because if you send multiple post requests with the same request body, then each time a new user with a new user ID will be created in the database, right? That means the result has been changed, it is impacted, and it every time it will impact, it's different. Okay, great. That is the explanation of this concept, and the same thing is written here also, which I already explained, right? What is the role of status codes in RESTful APIs? Here is the simple answer. Status codes are used to convey the results of a client request. So for example, whenever a request is sent from the client to the API server, that request on API server can be success, fail, unauthorized, etc., etc., right? Then to inform the result to the client, REST API send the status codes. Okay, so suppose client send one request to the API and API send a response with a status code starting like this one. That means the response is just informational, nothing important here. Okay, it's informational. Then if the response status code API starts with 2, then that means client request was a success on the server, API server. If a status code response is starting with 3, that means client request was redirected somewhere else. Okay, again it is not so important and it's very less used. Then if the response status codes starts with 4 or 5, that means client request was rejected or you can say fail. Okay, great. Now here are all the status codes also. Out of all these codes, the most important one is 200, which means the request was successful, and there can be some content also in the response from the API server. Okay, second important one is 204, which means again the request is successful, but in the response there is no content from the API server to the client. Okay, The next important status I will say is 400, which means client request has some problems. Okay, client request has some problems that I think most probably UI developers will fix because they are sending the request, right? For example, incorrect request format or incorrect data type they are sending in the request from the UI. Okay, 401 error means user or request is not at all authorized. Okay, it is related to authorization. 403 error means user is authorized, request is authorized, but it is maybe forbidden for some other resource. Like for some resource of API it is authorized, but not for others. For them 403 errors will be sent. Then 404 means the resource the request is looking for is actually not found. It is not present in the REST API. Maybe the client is using the wrong resource name they are asking for. Okay, this is about the errors. Then we have 500 status code, which means there is some error, but that is not due to client request. Request is fine, but maybe there is some connection internet issue, the server is down, API server is down. So this is the difference between these 400 and 500 also. In 400 cases, failure mostly because of client request. In 500 cases, failure is because of API servers, maybe not client request. Great. That is the, I think, the most complete answer of this question, right?